Coming to you from the TheEoNProject studios, overlooking the vast, pristine acreage of Primrose Village. Greetings from this hidden gem of the Blackstone Valley. You're listening to Experts of Nothing with Mike and Jay. Welcome one, welcome all to the TheEoNProject once again. So I'm looking across the room here today in the palatial TheEoNProject studios, and I do not see my good friend, my compadre, my partner in crime, Mike. So as we talked about earlier, Mike is unfortunately he is out of commission for the next few weeks. He had a rectal procedure done, and so he's recuperating from that. And so that's where we're at today. So because of that, we're gonna be doing something special here today. So we have a special guest that's gonna be helping me through the trials and tribulations of the TheEoNProject. So we have a remote guest on today, and it's somebody that if you're a fan of the program, you may have heard of in the past. So he used to go by the name 51 Pan Man, and he was one of our biggest fans early on. Still is a big fan, and his real name is Brent. I hope he doesn't mind me calling him that. Do you? Hello? Are you there, Brent?
I'm here.
Okay, all right. Well, here he is. So he obviously requires no introduction, and I'm looking at him via a web simulcast. And what's the time there where you are? First of all, where are you?
Well, I'm in Indiana, man.
Okay.
And the weather here is going to be the weather you're going to be getting, snow.
Sure.
So New England, the pinnacle of snow and ice, right?
Yeah, you got it.
Come on.
Yeah, no, we've been getting hammered here recently. So, yeah, so I'm looking at his mug
it's 10
here.
a.m. here.
It's 10 a.m. So what time is it here? Oh, it's 10 a.m. here. Oh, look at that. We're on the same.
We're on the same time schedule.
Is it schedule? Is it schedule? What is it?
Yeah, schedule. I think you have to say it schedule, like so that you sound British and far more intelligent than we really are.
Okay. Do you have a morning or a show beverage that you're partaking in this morning?
Well, elaborate a little bit. What are you getting at?
Well, you drink. Well, no. I mean, do you have a coffee? Do you have a tea? Do you have some sort of juicy beverage? What are you having? I know you need something to wet your whistle.
Yeah. So I have coffee. I have a tankard of very battery acid like coffee.
Okay.
Strewn about my table, I have cigarettes because I'm going to be like Larry King live here, circa like 1960, and chain smoke through this whole thing.
Okay.
It's going to be great.
I'm glad to see that you're smoking still. That's are you smoking
absolutely.
the Camel double wides? Is that what they are? Is that what they're called?
The Camel wides, and I suppose we should really let the cat out of the bag and tell everybody we've known each other for years, right?
Yeah. We kept up this charade long enough, and Brent is one of our biggest fans because we've known each other for several years, and we had some good times together serving in the Marine Corps, and he's passed the word on of the TheEoNProject across the Midwest and around the world, if you will. And here he is joining us today, and so that's great. You want to give a little background on that, or what? You want to tell a little story?
Well, yeah. I mean, first of all, you and I were into spirits from day one, and I'm not talking about the paranormal kind.
That's
of
right.
Course, as you're aware. But we had some good times. I think looking back on everything, I mean, we've been continually friends since the first day we met. Been through some crazy indocs and just bunches of different stuff, and shared career paths that were the same. And it's been made music. I mean, we should probably tell them too that you and I wrote the intro music that is so famously referenced all the time.
That's right, the TheEoNProject intro music, going back many moons ago.
Yeah, what a story that was too. You can call it Jabberwocky, man.
So
that was something.
Yeah, so that's obviously we clearly have a history there, but So anyway, so you're having a coffee. I have an herbal tea. I don't know where this tea came from. I found this. It's like a bag with dirt in it, and I found it underneath the kitchen sink.
Delicious.
Yeah, because I didn't have any regular coffee, so I just stuck it in some hot water, and that's what I'm partaking in today.
Well, and I got a quick question for you, since
Sure.
Michael to hammer you all the time with these ideas, and I'll get into why I ask you this question. But Iggy Pop,
Yep.
alive, dead?
Iggy Pop should be dead, but he's alive.
Yeah, and he looks bad. And I just realized the other day when I looked at myself, I'm starting to look very Iggy-ish. Like, I'm not like you and go out and hit the rock pile every day and tone my Greco-Roman physique into this like alabaster mold of honey and love. I'm starting to get saggy and like I'm real skinny, and I feel like I should be singing down on the street or something. It's not good, Jay.
It's
not good.
It's downhill for you if you look in the mirror and you think that you look like Iggy Pop. So let's just put it that way.
Yeah, and I'm not I guess I laugh too quite a bit because it's probably a nice what's the word I'm looking for, reprieve for you to not have Mike interject when you speak every 2 seconds. I love that guy. He's the best in the world. But the poor guy never gives you a chance to talk sometimes.
I don't know.
We laugh about it.
Yeah, it's it can be tough, but he's a very assertive. He's a large, assertive man. So it's hard to to keep him at bay sometimes. But I do my best. So let's tease the topic a little bit. Let's tease the topic a little before we lose half of our audience here. And
yeah, right.
Yeah. So what we're gonna do is, and Brent is he has a very broad interest in a well-versed interest in the Dyatlov Pass incident, which we've talked about in the past. So I think the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do we're going to talk a little bit more about that, and he's got some firsthand knowledge of a Russian man that he knows that has some interesting notes about that. Yeah. And also we're going to talk about, it's going to be a quick hit program. We're not going to go too in-depth about all of these different topics, but it's going to be conspiracy theories that actually turned out to be true. So we're going to tell you what they are and where they originated from, and you draw your own conclusions about that.
Yeah, and some of that stuff's pretty crazy, but yeah, Dyatlov, that's a really interesting thing. I actually first heard about it on your show, and Mike, I think, talked about it pretty early on in the run of the TheEoNProject, and it absolutely blew my mind. And at that point, I kind of got really more interested in it and started doing my own research. I by no means consider myself an expert, but I've looked into it quite a bit since then. And first of all, I guess, what do you think happened? I mean, what, you've got a basic knowledge of it too. I mean, I'm going to go into.
Well, for the people that aren't really sure, why don't you talk a little bit first about what it is, what happened there, and then we can talk about some theories, and you can talk about your experiences with the Russian man.
Yeah, Grigory.
Yes.
That's as Russian as it gets, man. So 1959, we're talking the height of the Cold War. We're talking about Russia back when, Russia was still, a pretty scary place to question the government or anything like that. And these hikers, as I'm going through and doing research, it turns out that these hikers were on an expedition into the Ural Mountains, and they were extremely experienced, really well versed in mountaineering, and they come up missing after a while. They don't check in. No one knows where they're at, and as an investigation ensues, is more or less when they discover the bodies, and the circumstances surrounding their discovery is such that you look at it and I just can't say for sure what happened. There's theories involving hypothermia. There's theories involving an avalanche. There's theories that go as broad as UFOs and the Russian Yeti.
Right.
So.
Yeah,
so I don't know.
Yeah, so some of the strange things. Obviously, I think they were all found outside, in various states of dress, some naked.
Yes.
And it appeared as though that they were fighting their way out of the tent. Like the tent was ripped from the inside.
Cut actually with a knife.
Yeah, exactly.
And the most interesting aspect of it is that when a forensic examination was done, and from my research, the doctor that did this he was a well-respected um, pathologist. And, this, you got to remember too, this was a big deal. You had all these families that were concerned. They all wanted answers, so as I've read more about it, the investigation was well done and very thoroughly done. And but the injuries to these bodies range the gambit of blunt force trauma that was literally described as not being of natural human force. And then one of the female victims was found missing her eyes and her tongue, and no evidence that it had been the cause of animal. Typically, as you're aware, bodies tend to get scavenged on by other predators, and there was no evidence that this had occurred to this female victim.
So the eyes and the tongue that were removed, it appeared as though that it was done intentionally by some other being or force or creature of some kind.
And I've heard UFO, but as you start to do research, the Russian Yeti, abominable snowman, becomes a very heavily talked about theory, because there's a local tribe of native Inuits that live in that area of Siberia. And, they have legends just like our Native Americans do about large bipedal, primate-like creatures. And one of the traits that these animals exhibit when they have supposedly taken prey, reindeer and other things in Russia, is removal of the tongue and eyes.
Oh.
So, yeah, it's bizarre. No question about it. It was covered up.
Sure.
Subsequently, after that is the one definitive thing that we certainly know. And you mentioned my friend Grigory in Russia.
Does he talk like this? Is his name Grigory?
Yeah.
Yes.
He says Dyatlov Pass.
Tell us a little bit about Grigory and his relationship with Dyatlov.
he knew instantly about it. I give you a little background on him. He's a very skilled craftsman. He makes really high end guitar effects pedals, and we're music people, and that's how I developed a relationship with him. But once I just on a whim, I asked him if he'd ever heard of Dyatlov Pass. Near instantly, he emails me back and begins to tell me that it's as prominent of a issue in Russia as any of our conspiracies are in the United States, like say JFK or something.
Right.
So he knows a lot about it, and it's clearly a subject that's discussed a lot in their popular culture. And he was adamant about the fact that it was clearly covered up, and that begs the question: why? Why would the Russian government cover up something that was a tragic accident? You'd think they'd want to divulge as much information about it as possible.
Well, it being the Cold, obviously it was at the time of the Cold War as well, so there wasn't a whole lot of information coming out of there at the time. So I can see in that regard, but going forward all these years later, and what happens is a lot of times with these conspiracies and conspiracy theories and things of that sort, when they're not addressed directly, when the government, whoever government tries to ignore it or tries to dismiss it as nothing without addressing the situation, only perpetuates to, make the conspiracy, give it even more credence. You know what I mean? So I think that's kind of what happened here.
People tend to jump to their own conclusions in lieu of having no definitive answer, and clearly that's the case. It wasn't until the late 90s that these documents were declassified, and as you look at it from an investigative standpoint, it's hard to see why they would make something so secretive, because in outward appearance, if it had been something like a tragic accident,
right,
I don't see the need for there to be so much. Who classifies a document over an accident involving an avalanche. You know, I think that's where so much conjectures come in, because people ask, you know, why would they have done that? And you know, that's kind of where different theories begin to manifest, you know, like you just discussed.
Yeah, so it's one of those things. Obviously, we'll never know the true nature of it unless the Russian government decides all of a sudden to be forthcoming with any knowledge that they have of that. But as long as Putin is reelected, which he just happened to be reelected again in a landslide, quote unquote.
Shocker.
Yeah, so I don't see that coming out anytime soon. But it's interesting, and it makes for good TV shows. It makes for good stories and topics on shows like this. So we'll keep perpetuating the story, and you know, hopefully maybe there'll be an advancement at some point.
Yeah, you know, there's some really good stuff out there. I read a really good book, Dead Mountain. It's available on Amazon. It's probably, in my experience, the most accurate depiction of what happened. And ultimately, all I can come up with in the end is that certainly something happened to those hikers that involved the government. And because of that, they subsequently felt the need to classify it. And the real question is, what is it that the government was involved in and these hikers that caused them to do that? So,
yeah, so it's interesting to say the least. So let's jump right into the next topic here, the next conspiracy, if you will, and I'll take the lead on this one. And the reason I'm going to mention this is because, you know, I see you puffing away on that, you know, on that lung dart over there, and you know,
I'm going to fire up another one. Hear that? That's a Zippo. That's cheeky.
So you have a fancy little Zippo over there, do you? I see that. Is it a custom Zippo? Is it just a store-bought cheapo? What is it? What is that there? Can you describe that for us?
It's got an Eagle Globe and Anchor on it.
Oh, of course. Yeah, so anyway, and this might not be as exciting as the Dyatlov Pass, but the conspiracy basically is, or the title would be, that Big Tobacco knew that cigarettes caused cancer. So this sounds a little bit ridiculous today, because we all know the the health detriment to your health that cigarettes have, you know, all kinds of things from high blood pressure. I'm telling you this, right? So you hopefully take some of this to heart. High blood pressure, you know, different forms of cancers, you know, it gives you
looking like Iggy Pop,
gives you a runny colon. You know, there are a number of different things that smoking cigarettes does for you. And we know that now with modern medicine and technology and things of that sort. But going back years ago, I mean, people have been smoking various things, tobacco, for hundreds of years. The Native American peoples have been smoking tobacco in various forms, in pipes. They've rolled it in different things. And obviously when the Europeans came here, they partook in it as well. And it became huge, and it still is huge today. Even though we are much more wise and we are much more aware of the health effects, people still smoke cigarettes, which I find amazing to me. So why don't you, before I get into the conspiracy, tell me a little bit about why you smoke cigarettes and why you haven't stopped after all these years, Mr. Pop.
Well, first of all, it looks cool. I'm just going to say that. I mean, you're a liar if you say it doesn't look cheeky to light up a cigarette at that particularly right moment. That's probably why I started. And then I got addicted because of all the wonderful things tobacco companies didn't put in cigarettes. Mm-hmm. But a lot of it's about routine, too.
So you got in the routine of smoking at an early age, and you just have been unable to shake the habit. Have you even tried? Have you attempted anything? Hypnosis, Nicorette gum, anything?
I'm thinking about trying Maria, actually.
Oh.
I don't.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Little ASMR. That's creepy, man. I have to concur with Mike on that. That stuff is just bizarre, but each to his own, I guess. No, I quit for 3 years once. Mm-hmm. I quit before I went overseas, but then ended up smoking 3 packs a day, and from that point, it's just been all downhill from there.
All right, so getting back to the big tobacco company. So the conspiracy basically is, for decades, tobacco companies basically buried the evidence that smoking is deadly. So, and we all thought that was people thought it was a conspiracy. People thought, just wasn't really true, because if you look back at ads, cigarette ads back years ago, back in the 50s and 60s, it's hilarious to see them because they're all laughing and everybody's having a good time. You had the Marlboro Man riding a horse, and everybody's like, "Oh, this is the greatest thing ever," But believe it or not,
Cancer is awesome.
yeah. But at the beginning of the 1950s, they were doing a lot of research, and it was showing that an indisputable statistic link between smoking and lung cancer. But it wasn't until the 1990s, and a lot of us may remember the Philip Morris Company and how they had a lot of different lawsuits going on and things like that, basically because they admitted that smoking could cause cancer. So that it finally came out in the 90s, and I think we knew that prior to that, but they finally admitted it, and they had to start putting warning labels on all the packs and things. You have a pack in front of you. All right, read the warning label. Let me see the warning label. Read that. Tell me what it says.
Surgeon General's warning. Quitting smoking now greatly reduces serious risks to your health. Cigarettes cause cancer.
So I noticed you smoking the Camels, and if you remember, they used to advertise to children, basically. They'd put the little cartoon camel on there. Remember that? It was like Freddie the Camel or something like that, and it was
Camel Go.
It was cartoon based, so the kids would get interested in it and want to buy them. And then they had the candy cigarettes to indoctrinate us at an early age. So
they still have those.
They do.
Yeah, at least here in Hillbilly, Indiana.
I'm surprised those aren't outlawed yet.
You would think they would be.
Anyway, all right. So that's it for that. I mean, I hope all of you out there that if you do partake in the funny stuff there, the tobacco, you take this as a public service announcement and quit now and live longer. How's that sound?
Or look like Iggy Pop.
All right. So why don't you go ahead? What do you got for your first conspiracy of the day besides Dyatlov?
Well, it's a biggie. I'll keep it short, but the Gulf of Tonkin incident, and for those of you that aren't aware, that was pretty much the interaction between the North Vietnamese government and the United States that drew us into the Vietnam War, and even within a few days of that incident, which basically was the USS Maddox, which was a naval cruiser. Was in the area of North Vietnam in international waters and was attacked by North Vietnamese torpedo boats. The Maddox subsequently engaged, and because of that, Lyndon Johnson went to Congress, and basically they passed the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, which drew us into Vietnam. Mm-hmm. Even after that occurred, there was a lot of speculation as to what really happened.
Right.
And in 2005, there was a Pentagon inquiry and subsequently a congressional hearing that determined that, we more or less provoked North Vietnam into that. And it, there's a lot of information on it. There's some good books. One, The Fog of War. Actually, the Pentagon Papers, which is a movie that is loosely based. The Post is the movie. Mm-hmm. It's loosely based on the Pentagon Papers.
Right.
That was an integral part of later determining that the Gulf of Tonkin incident had been exaggerated. And, in brief nuts and bolts of it, Maddox was in the area of North Vietnam conducting counter surveillance, espionage type stuff. Coincidentally, there was a commando raid being done by South Vietnam in the area, and it projected the impression that the United States was supporting this commando raid. Mm-hmm. Purposely, the Maddox, and I'll preface this by saying that both of us have an experience in the military. Some of these things are no fault of the people involved. They don't even know what's occurring. And orders are coming from the highest levels of command. So for those sailors that took part in that, it's hard to say what they knew was happening. But Robert McNamara, the defense secretary in the late 60s under Kennedy and Johnson, he actually stated that it was known at the White House that this action by the Maddox was going to cause us to enter Vietnam.
Right. So they were looking
You know,
they were looking for any reason to perpetuate a military action in Southeast Asia, which we all know ended up culminating in the Vietnam War, which, in my opinion, brings up an interesting phenomenon that takes place, and that is, people's lack of trust and lack of confidence in the government as a whole, because they feel deceived and they feel lied to over the course of time. And one of the topics that we talked about that kind of goes right in line with this, and I've been watching a lot of videos about this recently, is the flat Earth theory and these flat earthers that are out there.
Yeah.
As ridiculous as they are and how they're rooted in pseudoscience. Their beliefs and their structure goes back to a distrust of the government. And this sort of thing has been happening for years, and it's something called it's a 3-part phenomenon called the problem, reaction, solution. And it's basically like these false flag operations, sometimes sponsored by the government. Sometimes the government uses these things to perpetuate their agenda. And an example of that, going back further in U.S. military history, is what perpetuated the Spanish-American War. And some of us may, if we remember from history, the USS Maine, which was blown up in Havana Harbor in Cuba back in the late 1800s, and that was taken as an act of aggression and an act of terrorism by the Spanish. They said that the Spanish basically sabotaged that ship, and they blew up the ship, sinking the ship and killing many sailors in the process. But it turns out, and the U.S. used that as a precipice. Precipice, is that the right word? As a pretext.
Yeah,
a pretext for war against Spain, which we ended up obviously destroying Spain and put us on the map as a world power. But it turns out that the Maine actually suffered a catastrophic malfunction to no fault of the Spanish, where the boiler malfunctioned and it blew up, igniting the magazine in the ship and basically blowing a hole in it and destroying the ship and sinking it. So, am
I correct?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is the Maine still there in Havana Harbor? I thought at one point the wreckage of the ship had remained there.
I do believe that is the case, sure. And obviously, being that we're still not on great terms with Cuba, and being that they're still a communist nation, I don't foresee us, going and exploring that any more in the future. So I just thought I would add a little bit to that. So yes, I mean, the Gulf of Tonkin is another one of those what they quote unquote use as a false flag operation to perpetuate the beginnings of the Vietnam War. Anything?
Well, and that goes, that kind of segues into a topic that I wanted to discuss, and that's the government spying on us. And Edward Snowden. I just recently saw some information on the internet about Facebook. And Facebook is probably one of the greatest open source intelligence gathering tools out there. Mm-hmm. People just willy-nilly put every bit of information on Facebook. And there's a company, I guess it would be an organization called the Electronic Frontier Foundation. Mm-hmm. And they strive to educate people globally on the government filtering information via open source intelligence. And what I say is, Facebook, emails, are considered private, but, there's ways to go around that. And, Snowden, made it pretty clear that the NSA was, taking advantage of our private information for the purposes of counterintelligence. Mm-hmm. My experience in that is, my last year in the military, I worked in counterintelligence and I held a high-level security clearance. And, to this day, there are non-disclosure agreements that I had to sign that said I wouldn't discuss certain aspects of intelligence that I was privy to. Mm-hmm. And as delicately as I can put it, information gets misconstrued from its original happenings to what is divulged to the public. And I guess if you're not thinking the government is checking up on you, that would be naivety is that the right word?
Yeah, I mean, I get where you're going. I understand what you're saying, and to think that you can just put everything out there, and even stuff that you keep private. People, private correspondence between people on email and stuff like that you think nobody has access to. People are watching that, they're monitoring that, looking for keywords, looking for different things, and gathering intelligence and gathering all these things on the citizenry of the United States. So
well, and it's certainly necessary. Don't get me wrong. So I think there's a certain amount of it that's absolutely necessary. I just go back to the fact that if you are shocked by that, don't be, because it's occurring. And people have been saying that for years, and there's truth to it. Sure.
All right. Well, I think what we're going to do now is so we have our halfway point, which, normally on the program we'll either do a trivia, we'll do a commercial, we'll do a song. So today we're actually going to do a song, and this is a real treat because we have a local artist, singer-songwriter here in the studio today. He's sitting patiently over here in the corner, and they're getting him and his guitar player are getting tuned up. And they're going to do a performance for us. So this is, I'll just give him a quick intro. His name is Seth. This is Seth Creighton, and he's a local singer-songwriter here in the Blackstone Valley. And he's here today. He's going to play one of his hit songs, his local hit songs. And then after he's done with his song, he's going to he'll tell us a little bit about himself and kind of what he's up to, and then we'll go forward from there. So. Here we go. I'm gonna turn it over to him, and Seth, the stage is all yours. Go ahead.
Like I had a plan. See a face in my mind. No doubt it'll end this time. Drive all night on a country road. Whiskey in my veins turns ice cold. Hard and hard will do the task. Need to see my face, no mask. Jesus and that bottle, they stand behind me full throttle. Not without sin, cast the first stone. You fight back, you'll be the first gone. Bullet left that heated muzzle. Smoking flame left me puzzled. Life once left far behind. Here I am still doing time. Jesus and that bottle, they stand behind me full throttle. Not without sin, cast the first stone. You fight back, you'll be the first gone. one day. You better pray to God you're far away. Jesus and that bottle, they stand behind me full throttle. Not without sin, cast the first stone. You fight back, you'll be the first gone. Jesus and that bottle, they stand behind me full throttle. Not without sin, cast the first stone. You fight back, you'll be the first gone. You fight back, you'll be the first gone. You fight back, you'll be the first gone. Cold steel in my hand.
Wow, that was thank you, Seth. Thank you for coming on. You know, we appreciate all musical acts here on the Eon Project, and we strive to do what we can to help promote some of the up and coming musical specialties of the day, so to speak. So yeah, so why don't we just talk quickly? I know you guys have to run. You got a gig tonight. You got to go set up for. So we're not going to hold you too long. But so like I said before, this is Seth Creighton. He's a local singer-songwriter here in the Blackstone Valley. I believe Seth is going to tell us a little bit about himself. So the mic is all yours, my friend.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. We really appreciate you guys here at the project, and we like coming out here, and we found you guys, and we really like what you do, and bringing forth all the things you do. So once again, thanks for letting us come out and play one of our tunes for you. I guess before I go any further, I'd just like to thank my friend here, Tito Jones over here in the corner. He's he plays guitar as well, and add some of the beautiful harmony singing that we have going on there, that last song there. So yeah, I appreciate it. That's right now, that's our only song. We have one song, and that's it, and we play that song all the time. And we have a local we have a gig coming up next week at the local quickie store, and right down there on the road to the corner there. And so we'll be out there playing our song. We don't take requests, and we'll do our best. But if you can come out, see us live, and support us. And we're gonna release a new tape next week with that one song on it, and hopefully sometime soon we'll have some more songs as well. So so I'm from Woonsocket originally, and still live here. I haven't gone too far. We love Woonsocket, home of the pajama pants and hot wieners. So that's we love that, and we just go about our day, and so yeah, so that's about it. Once again, thanks, and we'll see you soon. All right, guys, goodbye.
All right, well, thank you, Seth, and thank you, Tito. What an amazing musical performance that was. And once again, you can catch him at the local Quickie Mart, performing out front on the sidewalk. And so that was great. That was great. What'd you think of that, Brent?
I loved it. Tito has the fingers of an angel, and what I think though is the next time when Mike's present, we need his husky baritone in there to add a little bit of that soul wrenching warmth that comes from his vocal cords.
Oh, to put that third part of that harmony in there. I got you. Yeah, no, that's a good idea. I'm sure.
I know Mike.
Yeah, I'm sure
Yeah,
Seth doesn't have a whole lot going on, so I'm sure he wouldn't mind coming back in here. We coaxed him in with with a dozen donuts and a hot herbal tea, and that's all it took to get him in here today. So, I'm sure we'll have him on again.
7 and 7.
Yeah, exactly. So I think I'm going to jump right back in, and we're gonna stay with the government conspiracy theme. All right, so that's a hot topic You know, there are a lot of people out there that don't trust the government. I am, for one, do not.
No,
You
do
know,
I?
there's such an abuse of power. People get power hungry. They look for all kinds of different ways to remain in power and all kinds of different things that are going on. So one of them, and this is musically themed as well, and that is that John Lennon was under government surveillance. So for years and years, that was the conspiracy that for some reason, one of the founding members of the greatest musical act of all time, the Beatles, was under.
I disagree.
I
disagree.
You disagree? What is wrong with you?
I judge a man on this question: Beatles or Rolling Stones, and obviously, you and I disagree on that.
If you think you can compare what the Beatles did to the Rolling Stones, and you, my friend, are truly Iggy Pop, and your brain has melted clearly before us all. But anyway,
we can do a show entirely on that. So I digress.
Okay, so so for years and years there was a belief. Well, for years there was a belief that the FBI was spying on former Beatle John Lennon, and you say to yourself, why? Why would the government be spying on John Lennon? What do you think? What do you think the reason would be for our government to be spying on that very creative young man?
It goes back to politics. I mean, it's clear that John was deeply involved in making his point about his personal feelings well known. But that's also post McCarthyism, and he was a foreigner. It's just ripe for that sort of behavior.
Exactly. And believe it or not, the government, obviously, they were spying on him. And like many of the counterculture heroes of the day, Lennon was considered a threat. But you know what's funny about that is he never he was an anti-war activist. He talked about how he believed in peace and love and all that stuff. And how do you fault a person for that, right? You can't really. So, but the government for some reason thought he was a threat. He was not a revolutionary type like many would think. And actually, that song, the Beatles song "Revolution," if you actually listen to the words carefully, it is more of an anti-revolution song in the sense that not that he's talking out against people who want to basically commit violence to overthrow the government. He wasn't into violence at all. He thought that there were other ways to go about bringing forth change in the world. Violence not being one of them. So in all actuality, he wasn't really much of a threat to the government. However, apparently under the Nixon administration, who, as we all know, was a paranoid individual to say the least, especially towards towards the end of his administration. But in 1971, he ordered the FBI to put Lennon under surveillance, and the INS, or the Immigration Naturalization Service, tried to deport Mr. Lennon a year later, unsuccessfully, obviously, because we all know that he was killed tragically in New York City. But so that's just one example of a famous person who was under government surveillance, really for no reason. But they do that to everybody. They do that to famous people. They do that to private citizens, and that sort of thing still goes on today. With the paranoia that's going on.
The Rolling Stones, as much as their name must be taboo to you, they were nearly barred from receiving visas in that same time frame because their appearance to the U.S. government was that they would degrade the moral standard of the American youth. And, of course, we're talking about Nixon, too. This is the guy that made Elvis a DEA agent.
Right.
I mean, come on.
Sure.
But, and our country isn't the only country that does this. Mm-hmm. My next topic is about Canada in that same time frame, the 60s, mid-60s. And if this isn't appalling, then I find it's really kind of humorous and shocking to even discuss it. But a professor at the University of Carleton in Ontario, Canada,
sure,
he developed a system of discovering homosexuals in the Canadian government. The byline on most of the articles is gaydar, and essentially it was determined through the infinite wisdom of our brothers from the north.
I don't mean to laugh
that-
at. I don't mean to laugh at the term gaydar. It's kind of a childish thing, but
No,
it goes
it's
back.
hilarious.
No, it's kind of
I mean,
the word is kind of funny. I'll admit that.
Well, and I have some good friends from Canada, and I dog on those guys pretty hard. But as benign as Canadians seem at times, they were really hot and heavy on weeding out homosexuals from their government, to include the military and all forms of government.
Yeah, and as we know, back in this, don't mean to interrupt you, but obviously, as we know, back in the '60s, people weren't as open with their orientation as they clearly are today. So they were they were living secret lives, and so that was I believe that was the whole point behind this project. If you want to talk a little bit more about it.
Yeah, and really they ultimately it was determined later that over 400 people were fired or removed from their positions, and another 9,000 people were placed on a suspect list. And essentially the gaydar, even back in, you want to laugh, they called it the fruit machine.
Oh
so
my.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that nowadays, them talking about something like this or doing something like this? That's crazy.
It's crazy to think about, because really it was not a machine at all. It was a system of gauging pupil dilation when exposing suspect individuals to same-sex erotic images. Just I mean, I guess it's one of those things where even the procedure now is so blatantly controversial that it boggles my mind that they'd even be able to justify some type of program like this. But this psychologist, Frank Robert Wake, developed this, and it was later determined that it actually had no scientific bearing whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people were discriminated against. There was recorded suicides. So it's clear that just like McCarthyism in our own time frame, it had a drastic impact on our social culture.
Now let me ask you this: What happens if you're just a regular dude? You're a straight man, you're a heterosexual man, right? But you have a keen fashion sense. You're a snappy dresser. You like to wear smelly perfumes. You enjoy Broadway musicals. What if you enjoy all that stuff and you pop up on their gaydar, even though you're not a homosexual by any means? Are they still going to persecute you for that?
And let's take me for example. Iggy Pop as I am, I'm a stylist. I coif my hair in a very trendy manner. I'm sporting a blue mohawk today, as you pointed out.
Oh,
I would suspect that I would very quickly be on their radar,
or their gaydar, if you will. So yeah, no, that was obviously politically incorrect today. You can never get away with that sort of stuff, nor should you, because it's clearly, discriminatory, and you're singling out one group of people just because they're different than you. So that's a tragedy to say the least. So I'm going to jump into another interesting one that most people probably have never heard about, and it's another one involving our government. Shockingly, so there was a theory or a conspiracy going back to the '60s that the Dalai Lama, and we all know the Dalai Lama, the man of peace. Yeah, that the Dalai Lama was a CIA agent. Well, believe it or not, he kind of was, and perhaps the reason the Dalai Lama, we see him smiling in all those pictures, is because it has something to do with the money that he was pulling down from the U.S. government during the 1960s. And according to once again some declassified intelligence documents, apparently he earned something like $180,000 in connection with the CIA. Yeah, the CIA's funding of the Tibetan resistance. And the Tibetan resistance was basically just that. The Tibetans were basically in a war with China at the time. And the U.S. government...
Doesn't sound very scary, I'll be honest with you.
Well, the Tibetan resistance doesn't sound scary?
Not to me.
I'll tell you what, those Sherpas, man, I'll tell you, they can be a formidable opponent.
Yeah, I would, and doesn't the British have the Royal Gurkha Rifles or something in Tibet? Those guys are pretty bad.
Yeah, but we actually gave them not donated, but basically gave the Tibetan resistance $1.7 million a year during this time period. And the idea was to disrupt and hamper China's infrastructure. So the Dalai Lama was a paid agent of the CIA and tried to aid in the resistance of the Chinese. So once again, our hands as the government are dabbling in all these different things across the nation, probably in a bunch of stuff that we probably have no business doing in different countries around the world. So that's just another example of that in the distrust people have for the U.S. government and governments in general, for that matter.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And one of the things I wanted to touch on was MK Ultra, which that there's so much information about there. I believe you guys did a show on MK Ultra,
right?
Instead of rehash a bunch of information, I'll just say go back and hit up the TheEoNProject site and check out that podcast on MK Ultra, which really great information. If you're a Stranger Things fan, you'll adore it. But just a couple other things real quick, because I know we're running out of time. During the late 50s, we conducted a project that has been affectionately termed the Dead Baby Project.
Oh, that sounds really affectionate.
Oh, absolutely. And, in short, late 50s, we were sanctioning the acquisition of tissue samples from young children to study the effects of radiation. This has all been proven. There's a lot of information out there, but it literally turned into a worldwide epidemic of body snatching, including families unable to properly grieve and properly provide adequate burial for their children. Mm-hmm. This was something our government was well aware of, and I won't go into it, but do some research on it and look at some of the quotes made by the doctors and stuff that were requisitioning this material, and you'll be pretty shocked by it. I'll end on a lighter note though. So the worst video game ever, E.T.
Yeah, that's the conspiracy. That's the belief. The E.T. game for Atari back in the early 80s.
Yeah, 83, and it actually economically it brought about the end of the video game industry for quite a long time. Do a little bit of research, get on YouTube, and look at the minute and 33-second video that I watched on E.T. the Extraterrestrial. I literally wanted to gas myself in the garage after watching that video. I play a lot of video games. My kids do. So I have an understanding of gameplay and how it should pan out. And this game was so bad that Atari buried truckloads of cartridges in the New Mexico desert. There's a pretty interesting show on, I believe it's Netflix, that talks about this game, and they actually went out and located the site and dug up a bunch of the games, and now they're kind of selling for some money on eBay just because of the fact that the game was so tragically bad.
Right. So that was the legend all those years that E.T. was buried in the desert out there, and nobody could prove it.
Absolutely,
And they were like, "There's no way that actually happened." And like you said, that the documentary, I don't remember the name off the top of my head, which I probably should because I've watched it. But they certainly do. They go out and they tell the backstory on it, and they do research, and they go out and they actually find the landfill where all these games were buried out in the desert.
It's kind of tragic in the sense that Atari was such a founding cornerstone in video games. I remember playing the Atari 2600 when I was a kid, and I adored it. But it really did. It crushed the video game industry. That game was so epically bad.
Yeah. That was obviously Atari's started to fall from grace from there, and they just could never really pick up the pieces. And then, as we know, Nintendo came along and pretty much dominated for many, many years. But it's interesting. I like watching some of those retro video game documentaries and videos and things of that sort. So, well, yeah, I think you know what? I think we're gonna wrap it up here, and once again, I
It's been
appreciate.
a pleasure.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I appreciate you coming on, and I get to watch your face from across the room here on the little tiny screen, which was quite the treat for me because I don't get to experience you that often, my friend. And
No, and we have to be careful here because the Canadian government may put us on a list. But it's always good to see you.
And I'll give my best to Mike for you, so I know that he's probably going to be listening here, and hopefully you lived up to his expectations.
Yeah, I doubt it, but I appreciate it. It's been a blast.
All right, hey Brent, once again, thanks a lot, buddy, and we'll be in touch, and we might need you again. Who knows? I'm not sure how much longer Mike's going to be out, but if we do, I'll let you know. We'll discuss some new and interesting topics here on the Eon Project. So just remember, until next time, the truth exists. Believe it.